of the path between Jerusalem and Galilee. And those who went from Jerusalem to Galilee most frequently would completely go around Samaria so that they didn't have to pass through that land that they were in dispute with. Jesus has been in Jerusalem at the Jordan. He is now heading back north, but he doesn't skirt around Samaria. He goes right through the middle of it. Hear this story. So Jesus came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon. A Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." His disciples had gone to the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to Jesus, "Sir, you have no bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob, who gave us the well and with his sons and his flocks drank from it?" Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I will give them will become in them a spring of water, gushing to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I may never be thirsty or have to keep coming here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come back." The woman answered Jesus, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying I have no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see that you are a prophet." When his disciples returned, they were astonished that he was speaking with a woman. But no one said, "What do you want?" or "Why are you speaking with her?" Then the woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I have ever done. He cannot be the Messiah, can he?" They left the city and were on their way to see Jesus. Many Samaritans from that city believed in Jesus because of the testimony the woman had made. Please pray with me. Might words spoken and words heard and the spaces in between begin to address our thirst. Amen. You probably never imagined you would ever see the word moonshine in a sermon title. But there it is, right in your bulletin, better than moonshine. And moonshine's actually a rather fascinating beverage. It's a clear white whiskey made from corn mash And sometimes it's called white lightning, or hooch, or home brew. Most often it is distilled illegally at night, hence the name Moonshine. And it's often made in stills hidden away in the hills of Appalachia. Its history is all tied up with taxation and a desire to sidestep the laws of the land. Indeed, in many ways, moonshine production peaked after the passage of the Volstead Act in 1920 and the establishment of the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which essentially outlawed the manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol. Over the decade plus of Prohibition, moonshiners and federal revenue agents were in a constant state of battle, at times quite literally. Whole criminal careers like that of Al Capone were built on the reality that, prohibition or not, folks wanted their cocktails and their spirits, even if it meant secretly breaking the law in the speakeasy clubs that dotted the nation, even if it meant drinking some backwoods brew which had been made under some secretive and less than sanitary conditions. But moonshine had been around long before Prohibition. More than likely, it was first introduced into the back country by the Scotch-Irish immigrants who first settled the hills of West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee in the early years of the 19th century. Many of them came from Ulster County in Ireland and brought with them a recipe for whiskey that didn't need to be aged. Instant satisfaction. You could practically wrap your lips around the spout of the still and get what you wanted. In the homeland, they'd called their homebrew Uisca Beta, which in Gaelic means the water of life. Our passage from John is all about the water of life. But not some brew distilled under the cloak of darkness at midnight, rather something revealed in the bright day of noontime. The story takes place at the lip of a well, a famous well at that, Jacob's well, one believed to be on the land where the patriarch Jacob had watered his sheep. It was a dug well, around 100 feet deep. To get a drink, one needed a good long length of rope and a bucket, things the traveling preacher from Nazareth just hadn't packed in his travel along. At first, Jesus is there by himself, no doubt tired and thirsty from the long morning's journey he had shared with his disciples. They have gone into the nearby village to get something to eat, but they are in Samaria, that region between Galilee and Jerusalem where Jews were not always welcome because of the long-standing feud they had with the Samaritans. So no one knew quite how those disciples would be received, whether or not they would find any refreshment. Most times it was the women of the village who came out to get water. It was one of their chores, one of their duties, and most often they wisely did so in the cool of the early morning. So at first it looked as if Jesus would be able to do very little about his dry throat and his parched lips. But then Then there appears a woman from the village. Is she an outcast? Why is she coming at this time of day when no one else is usually around? Is she unwilling to encounter others who might tease or torment her? Or has she simply fallen behind in her duties on this particular day? We don't know. "Give me a drink," Jesus boldly says to the woman. She, of course, is startled. Jews do not speak to Samaritans. And a Jewish man would never speak to an unrelated woman in public. Too much risk of scandal. But Jesus does speak to her. Driven, perhaps, by his thirst, or perhaps driven by his constant need to reach out to those whom society has left behind. "Are you a Jew," she says, "asking a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" If you only knew who I was, you would ask me for a drink of the living water, the water of life. You don't have a rope. You don't even have a bucket, sir. Where will you get this water of life? Jesus continues. Everyone, he says, everyone who drinks water from this well, famous as it may be, will be thirsty again. They will have to come back here again and again every day, just as you do. And yet they'll never be satisfied. But anyone who drinks the water that I have to give them will never thirst again. It will be like a fresh spring, bubbling up, gurgling, gushing from now to eternity. At first, she misunderstands. "Well, give me a cup of that water," she says. "Then I'll never be thirsty again. I won't have to keep trudging out here to this well." But when Jesus speaks of the water of life, he isn't speaking about literal water. He's not even talking about moonshine. No, he means the life-giving Spirit of God. The living water that Jesus refers to is that water of life, which brings with it the realization that one is loved unconditionally, that one is fully, completely accepted. And that is exactly what this woman had been looking for all along. "Go call your husband," says Jesus, "and then come back." I have no husband," she says, hanging her head and drawing a circle in the sand with her toe. She actually had 5 husbands. Some perhaps she had outlived. Some may have divorced her. And now she was living with yet another man. Her intense need for acceptance, for love, had worn out a multitude of relationships. Yet she was still unsatisfied. Her thirst, her longing, still unquenched. But here at last, this traveling preacher brought her hope. This man without a rope or bucket was offering her the answer to her seemingly insatiable thirst. For in his presence, in his words, in his actions and gentleness, she discovers the only love that can truly satisfy our longing to be loved unconditionally. And that is the love of God. No material thing, no drink, no drug, no philosophical system, not even a relationship with another human being can fill that void, quench that thirst, satisfy that longing. It is God and God alone who can and does love us and accept us unconditionally. No ifs, ands, or buts. And so it is that the love of God, the Spirit of God, is indeed the true water of life. This is not a morality tale, by the way. The Samaritan woman may or may not have had moral failings that led to her multiple relationships and her multiple marriages. But clearly, she was looking for love in all the wrong places, as the old song says. And she keeps repeating the same behavior over and over and over again, but to no avail. She is like the alcoholic who keeps drinking, hoping to relieve his or her discomfort, and yet waking up every morning after with a hangover. She is like the compulsive gambler who keeps thinking the big win will bring joy and happiness, but even when it comes in, the heart, if not the pockets, is empty. She is like the binge eater who longs for comfort and yet walks away from every midnight binge, every midnight gorging, unsatisfied and disgusted with him or herself. It is diseased behavior. It is, as Kierkegaard puts it, a sickness unto death. For ultimately, any addiction leads to death. If not literal physical death, then spiritual death. Because you can't find real life anywhere but with and in God. Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, discovered that truth. Before AA, he once wrote, "We were trying to drink God out of a bottle." But the love of God, the greatness of God, can't be found in a bottle, or in multiple marriages, or in chocolate cake, or in a big win at the track, or in making millions on the stock market. As long as we look for any of those things to fill the void, we will be dissatisfied. We will be thirsty. Sisters and brothers, this is not a temperance sermon. I'm not suggesting we revisit the days of prohibition. I'm not making a comment on the legalization of marijuana or the moral implications of gambling or the wisdom of eating desserts. I am saying that all addictions are all around us, and that many, if not most of us, struggle with one addiction or another. And for any addiction, believe me, there are plenty of folks willing to fire up the still and make some moonshine at our expense. But that water, moonshine, or any like it, will never satisfy, never really quench our deepest thirst, our deepest longing. That thirst, that longing, can only be satisfied by a relationship with God. Those who found recovery in fellowships like AA have also discovered this fundamental truth. As they worked the 12 steps of such programs, they came to believe that a power greater than themselves could restore them to life. And so, like the woman at the well, they turned their lives and their wills over to that same higher power and thus found love and acceptance. And that higher power, whom many choose to call God, that higher power wants health and healing and comfort and strength for you as well. Are you thirsty? Is there something missing in your life? Do you long for unconditional love and acceptance and grace and comfort and healing? Then trust me on this. Or better yet, trust the millions in recovery programs around the world. The millions who have discovered the truth that God's unconditional love is better than moonshine. Far, far better indeed. Yahoo. Coming for to carry me home, swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.